the topic today, which is to do with worry. And I thought, now, isn't it interesting that Greece has given me this topic, and Greece is renowned for their worry beads. You know, it's one of the perhaps the least important things that Greece has given the world. The world has been shaped by Greece in many ways. And so I was curious, and my understanding was that the worry beads, that they were first used by monks, and they may have just been like a piece of rope with knots in it. And it was to remind the monks, and you can correct me if I've got this information wrong, to remind the monks that of the prayers that they had said, and that every moment could be a moment of prayer before going on to the next moment of prayer, etc. And then too, more recently, I came to know, like my own background, I was brought up Catholic in Ireland, and I came to know of one of the titles that they give to Mary, and there's a very famous picture as well representing this, but I'd never heard of it before. But the undoer of knots, the untier of knots. And so I thought that was kind of interesting too, because if we see the knots sometimes as, you know, the things that I'm worrying about, that there's this knot, there's this obstacle, and my focus is on it, I'm overthinking it, etc. If I only stay there, then it's to no avail. But I think the idea is to be able to, despite the size of the obstacle, to be able to understand it in relation to maybe one's own self, in relation to time, and that there is something constructive that I can do about it. And of course, it all comes back at some level to a way of thinking. Who doesn't worry? Do you know anyone who doesn't worry ever? But there's a big difference. There's a wide range of worrying. And I was just thinking as I was sitting in meditation, you know, one of the things that this school teaches us is to speak off the cuff, so to speak, that it would have been so much easier if we'd been able to write it out and just read it, like a lot of people do when they give a speech or a talk. But here we're not encouraged in that direction. And I think, why? Was it just adding another degree of difficulty? I don't really think so. And I don't even think that there was any psychological basis for it. But in terms of psychology, this is one of the biggest fears that people have, and that they worry about and they get nervous about, is public speaking. And so I suppose in terms of our getting back to a state of wholeness, then we have to see that these things are not as big as we thought they were. And so rather than just taking the easy way out and just reading from a piece of paper, even if you've written it yourself, but you have to do it this way, because in so doing, a number of things happen, not only in terms of communication, because rather than your head down and reading something, you're engaging with your audience. It's also taking you beyond what you thought were your limits or your capacity or your ability, and that you find that you're able to do it. Because again, when we talk about worry, you know, what other word would you use for worry? It could infer, I'm afraid, I care, when you say I'm worried, I have tension, or just simply that I'm thinking too much about things, right? Or a particular thing. And so in the journey of going towards the fullness or the wholeness, these are things that by overcoming them, it grows our self-confidence, and maybe not just our self-confidence, but even self-worth. That the whole thing of the spiritual journey is finding another way of IDing yourself, of looking at yourself, of understanding yourself, of expanding yourself. And so today, more than ever, I may have said this 20 years ago, but it is more true today, that souls are opening up, I think, at a much faster speed than ever before. And that you can look around and you can see this aspect of expanding consciousness or of contracting, you know. So am I in a state of expansion or am I contracting? Is fear inhibiting me and putting me more inside myself, but in a locked position, being put in a, almost like in a cell, rather than the expansion that trusts that I have, you know, the ability or the wherewithal to meet life head on, and that somewhere within that, whatever it is that is going to come to me, I am complicit in devising that situation or scenario, because the soul in its innate wisdom wants to arrive at the destination, and it knows, you the soul know exactly what will be asked of you, what will be required of you to get you back, you know, like the worry beads, you go around and you arrive back at the first bead again. That will get you back to that original place or that original state, which is, of course, of peace and of serenity. I think it was Daddy Janky who said, I didn't actually hear her say this, but it's been attributed to her, that like a bird sitting on a branch is not concerned or worried that the branch is going to break. Now, the bird doesn't believe in the strength of the branch and that it won't break, but what the bird has trust in is the strength of her own wings. And so I think this is what we are focusing on when we are on a spiritual path, that it is about going from the reliance and the belief in everything that's external to our own selves to that internalizing in the right way and cutting through all the stuff and the nonsense and coming back to that that within your own self that is of the finest fabric, if you like, that is spiritual, that not just spiritual, but is actually divine. And so every one of us, I think at the present time, we can see the deficit and we know that we are all in need of filling up. And so what is the cup from which I'm going to drink? And of course, once again, anything that is temporary is not going to satisfy the need of that which is eternal. And so I, the soul, need something, being eternal, I need something that is going to match me, that has to be of the same nature, of the same caliber. And this is then within the meditation that is taught by the Brahma Kumaris, the idea of a source from which you can draw that energy that is going to show you the truth or the lack of truth of the arguments that you continually present for being worried, for being afraid, for not being able to, all of the justifications. And this very tenderly and very lovingly will show you the untruth of those things and will encourage you, not force you, but sometimes you will be forced to see the clarity. And when I say that you will be forced, it is not from any external force, in a manner of speaking, but the less willing I am to move towards love, for example, which is the first law, which is foundational, the less willing I am to move towards love or empathy or compassion or forgiveness, then the more physical is going to be the world that I will have to deal with. And so every one of us has a vibration, and very often we let circumstances and situations dictate that vibration. But no, I'm the one who should be in charge of my vibration. And so sometimes just this difference in the personality that I am, or the personality that I have. And when it comes to worry, do you know personalities who are worriers? Of course, maybe you'll include yourself. But we want to go beyond just the personality to the character. And sometimes the personality is so strong and so all-consuming that it blocks the character of the person. And for my own self, I might have been a worrier if it hadn't been for my mother. Now, it wasn't that my mother said, "Child, don't worry, everything's going to be all right." But on the contrary, she was the number one worrier. So her teaching was almost in a negative form. But I remember as a young person saying to myself, I'm never going to be like that. In that, and the scenes that I would remember where maybe she would have lost, a 20-pound bill or a, 20-pound note or something. And of course, she had just misplaced it. But what's her first thought? Oh, I must have thrown it on the fire. And so this is what the worrier does, that it's not necessarily based in reality. Worry is good if it leads to perhaps a change in habit or discipline. If I'm worried about my health now that I'm aging, if there's concern about it, well, I could just continue to worry about it and not do anything about it. But let me reduce the need for worrying by paying attention to my daily timetable and the foods that I eat and the exercise that I do, and not least the company that I keep. because again, there will be that company which will want to hear. It's hard to see it actually, but there will be people that is the engagement between both. It's like one will initiate the need for worry, and the next one will amplify the need for worry, and the next thing they're practically, tearing their hair out over it. And it's all connected at some level with imagination gone wrong. Of late, very much I'm seeing how the one who is our teacher has engaged our imaginations, has gotten us to bring into our consciousness an image that we didn't have before. And so whether it was the most basic thing of I am peace or I am love, what I know in terms of reality before, I would shake my head and say, it's not true, it's not true. But again, with loving tenderness, we're being invited, ruminate on this. Don't let it be a fleeting thought, but engage with the possibility, using that thought, I am light, I am eternal, I am peace. And then not just those few thoughts, but going into even the realm of eternity. And the idea, which maybe for most of you is already accepted, that there have been many incarnations. This is not anything new in terms of Greek philosophy, that you've had other incarnations. And you're being asked to lightly think about them. And in particular, the first incarnation, and you're being asked to imagine that at that point in time, you were, if this doesn't sound sacrilegious, like a mirror image of God. In other words, you were full in your heart and in your intellect and in your relationships and every possible expression of all of those things that would be attributed to God. And maybe it could just come down to truth and love. And so you see how that one engaged our imagination. And here we are, however many years later. And it's not just a group of people working with their imagination, but you see the practical result. You see the manifestation of that in terms of the places that have been created, the change that has happened within our own lives, and are contributing something to the world. So we're not just sitting as monks or nuns, contemplating, but that contemplation has a very profound and practical manifestation. And so I suppose worrying, mostly you're using your imagination. And very often it's not healthy imagination. So make that distinction between what is a healthy imagination and one that has been, kind of corrupted in some sort of a way. Now, we know we're all rational beings. We're supposed to be rational beings, but it's like as if the signal has somehow gotten jammed. And when you see sometimes people worrying about something, you see they're taking it to extremes. And then they'll even justify it, like say, for instance, they're worried that the child hasn't come home, or that the husband or wife is late. And then they start making repeated, they're only 5 minutes late. But it's like, oh, they must have had an accident. Maybe I should call the hospital. Or they're saying they care about you so much, and this is why they keep phoning you every 10 minutes, and you're trying to tell them you're fine. But this is where the worrying becomes an obsession, and where then it's like anything, when there's too much of it, it becomes something different from the original. And so it can go into anxiety, obsessiveness, depression, and then you need medical help in trying to deal with it. And it seems a little irrational to me from the point of view that, how is it that, say, for instance, I have a glass of water here, and I know exactly what my capacity is for drinking that water. I won't drink the whole thing at one go. Or again, you're taking a shower, you know how to adjust the flow of the hot water and the cold water so that you don't damage yourself, you don't burn yourself. So there's that rational aspect, and that maybe it's not exactly wisdom, but you know when to turn things off, you know when to stop, you know when enough is enough. But with worrying, then maybe we haven't tried to put the brakes on that, or maybe we haven't found some kind of an alternative to worrying. And so what could we use to replace the worry? That, okay, you can say get positive. I don't know that that's always possible. But what would you trade your worry for? And I think sometimes with some folks, all of us, as well as understanding what your level of vibration is, and being able to accept yourself where you're at, and be content with yourself at that level of vibration, which means now you are prepared to move on to the next level of vibration. It keeps ascending if you permit it so. But sometimes what happens in that aspect of the vibration, it comes from the energy. There's an energy that each one of us, an energy level that we're comfortable at or comfortable with. And so just like some people, that they can be calm for a while, but then they like to stir things up just to add a little bit of spice, and then to settle back to where they were before. And I feel this happens too sometimes with, people who are worriers, that they get some kind of a charge out of it. They like that tension, because there's a tension that's created with worry. They like the tension. They like maybe even the increase in their blood pressure. And what they really like is then that everything they're then convinced, oh, everything's all right. It wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen. The person's safe. Everything's okay. So then there's this, it's like turning the valve down or depressurization. And so people can get addicted. Do you see how that happens? That there can be an addiction to those extremes, that they like to swing because it proves they're alive, that they don't have another way to to be alive, in a sense, that proves to them that they're alive, even if it would seem to be somewhat painful. And so this then is where, meditation comes in, and where instead of worrying at a simple level, that you begin to cultivate hope. You start planting a different kind of a seed. And I think for many people who are worriers or are extreme in anything, for all of us, there's a point where we say enough is enough. I know that there has to be change. And so this is where then the spiritual aspect comes in. Because once you step on a spiritual path, you are subtly making a commitment for change. And even though our tendency was to try and change everything on the outside, including the people we lived with, we know we're not going to be permitted that anymore, and it doesn't work anyway, but that the change has to be in relation to my own consciousness. And again, this thing of like everybody's level of vibration, do you find yourself sometimes being surprised at the way people think, at the way people perceive things, not only in terms of politics or what's happening in the world, but even a situation in which you're both involved in? It's like, how can they think like that? How can they see like that? And so even as they're seeing in what you perceive to be a warped way, it's also offering you the opportunity to go beyond seeing them having warped thinking. However they're thinking, however unrealistic they're being, however dishonest they're being, what does it have to do with me? And who's more influential at that moment in time? Is their stance, their way of seeing or being, affecting or influencing my way of being, that I compromise my way of loving or of being accepting of all that it is, all that there is, and that then two egos start, challenging or battling with each other? That this is the thing to notice in your own self, because as you keep reaching for the higher ground, then you are going to have situations and people who will maybe challenge you. But again, it's not to, as someone said, it's not to obstruct, but it's to instruct. And so that everything is for my learning and for my growth. Just like nowadays, we take everything and we recycle it. We put it to a better use. And so too, whatever is in my domain of my life, that at one level, it has nothing to do with the other people who are in my life, at one level. And for them, I have nothing to do with their life. It's up to them, who allocates who, the different roles in your drama. Aren't you the hero in your own drama? Or not, if not the hero, at least the main actor, and then you decide who the authority figures are, who your enemies are, who your friends are. And for the most part, they didn't even audition for those roles, but you gave them to them. And so it's like, again, that in freeing myself from different perceptions and beliefs, in a kind of a way, I help others, to cut the cord as well. And I suppose when it comes to worrying, and it was a commitment that I made a long time ago, and I'm talking about my very, very early days in with the Brahma Kumaris, and in those days living with Sister Jayanti and Daddy and Sudesh Didi, and I could see how people were always pulling them, in a sense, how they always had a problem, how they were always going to them. And I remember making a determination at that time that I would never be a problem for them, that they would never have to worry about me, they would never have to be concerned about me. I'm not saying that I fulfilled that 100%, I had my moments, no doubt. But this type of thing, like it's commitments to your own self. I never made it verbally to them, but I made it to my own self. And so this is the kind of thing that then you've made a commitment, or, you've made a contract with your own self. So you're not just a haphazard piece of clay that's somebody allocated a role to, and that you have to play it and there, but for the grace of God, and it looks like everybody else got better parts or better lines to say. But no, it's this thing, God, in God's infinite wisdom, is not only introducing himself to us, and there's nothing that you can't love about God. So yes, if you want to, at the level of imagination, say the idealized one, but you know what? I feel that God, as the teacher, also sees each and every one of us in our idealized form. And so here it's not just about getting to know God in terms of the totality of that being, but within that, almost as a prize, as an addition, you are coming to know your own self, and even accepting the possible, not just the possibility, but the actuality that the idealized one, the perfect one, also loves you, despite whatever is your level of vibration at the moment. Because God has known you in your completion, in your divinity, as mirror image of himself, and is now providing not just the mirror, but also the energy through meditation to take you back there again, to take you back to that belief in your own self, and even a sense of humor about your little failings or your way of your perception before, that you're able to knit all of that into the whole thing. And then where you truly know that everything will have good consequences, that everything, that even when it looks bad, it's good, that there are secrets in it, that everything is geared at some level to your benefit. But unfortunately, even when souls are, say, being loved by others, they're not able to savor it. They're not able to hold it because of their limited way of seeing themselves. And so all of this changes with this inward journey through meditation. And it's a journey, we know, but where we no longer have an excuse for worrying, because your inclination is to see everything with a feeling of gratitude. And it's not about being a martyr or a victim while you're there, but that you intuitively know that by your thinking everything is good, it becomes good. And therefore, no need for the worry. I see the flower. And I let it be the image for myself. In terms of living, in terms of spiritual fragrance and beauty. Just being myself. No matter what surrounds me. I am whole and complete within myself. And I exude the qualities enhanced by the sun. Of light, of warmth, and the beauty that's inherent in the form of love. Acceptance. And of knowing. And because I love, I know. That all will be well. Om Shanti.